Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter from TopTechBoy.com, and we're here today with lesson number 12 in our incredible new tutorial series where you're going to learn Python or you're going to die trying. I'm going to need you to pour yourself a nice strong cup of black coffee. That would be straight up black coffee, no sugar, no sweeteners, no creamer, none needed. Because you got to remember, you guys on this channel, you're jet fighter aircraft. And what does a jet fighter need? It needs jet fuel. And your jet fuel is not a Coca-Cola or a Mountain Dew. It's straight up black coffee. I am also going to need you to get out your Visual Studio Code. And as you are firing up Visual Studio Code, as always, I want to give a shout out to you guys who are helping me out over at Patreon. It is your encouragement and your support that keeps this great content coming. You guys that are not helping out yet, look down in the description below. There is a link over to my Patreon account. Think about hopping on over there and hooking a brother up. But enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let's jump in and talk about what we are going to do today. We are going to look at the solution to the homework assignment, which I gave you in lesson number 11. And that was to take our grades program, which I believe by the time we got through with lesson number 11, would input a set of grades, would average the grades, would find the high grade, would find the low grade, and then print the high, low, average, and the set of grades. Okay. What the assignment though was to take that program and then sort the grades from high grade to low grade. So you would assume in that list that the grades would be in random order, but to sort the list of grades from the high grade to the low grade. Was anyone able to do this homework, or did you all fold up like cheap Walmart lawn chairs? Okay, now I will say that if you use the Python sort function, that would be considered cheating, because I need you to think. I need you to learn how to think. You don't learn how to think by just using someone's canned library. You've got to think through problems like this, because when you become an engineer and someone's paying you, they're not going to pay you for a solution that you can just call a canned routine. They're going to pay you to think through something and code it. That's what I want you to do. Learn how to think like an engineer. Learn how to think like a programmer and write code on your own. Now, if you were not able to do this particular homework assignment, it's kind of understandable, because this really, I think it's a lot more subtle and a lot harder than what you think, but it's kind of like a classic homework problem that you're going to be given in college. And so you sort of need to be able to think through it and know how to do it. So that's what we're going to do today. We are going to look through the solution. Now, really in sorting routines, it's all about who can sort the most efficiently. So like the quickest, most efficient implementation of sorting long lists. We're not going to worry about being elegant and efficient and fast. I just want to sort through it as simply as possible so that you will understand it. And then later on, we could perhaps look at more efficient routines, but it's just kind of like starting from scratch and building a program that would sort a list of grades. And like I said, there's a couple of gotchas in here that make it a little bit harder than you would think. And so for this particular program, we better map it out on paper, and we better get it working on paper. And if we can get an algorithm in our mind on paper, then we can code it. But this is not a program that you can just sit and start banging out. You got to kind of think about it. All right, so we're going to go over here to Sketchbook, and I'm going to get out of your way, and then we're going to kind of think through this. And so let's see if I can come up here. Let's just create an array. Okay, and so let's put 4 grades in our array. And just to make it fun, I'm going to put it in the worst possible order, right? I wanted to sort from high grade to low grade. And so let's say we have 4 grades, 60, 70, 80, and 90. Now for this case, this is kind of like the worst possibility, right? Because they are in exactly the wrong order. Well, what do we want to do? We want to step through this array, and we want to compare grades of I, okay, grades of I to what? Grades of I plus 1. So we're going to start with I at 0, and then we're going to look at grades of I, which would be grades of 0, which would be 60, and we want to compare it to the next one in the list, which would be grades of I plus 1. So the first time through the for loop, I is 0, so it's going to be looking at 60, and it's going to be then comparing it to the next one in the list, which would be grades of I plus 1, which is going to be 70. Well, what do you want to do? Well, if grades of I is less than grades of I plus 1, as it is here, then those are in the wrong order. So we're going to have an if grades of I is less than grades of I plus 1, then what we want to do is we want to swap their positions. Okay, we want to swap their positions. And so what this would be is, you can see it's going to be for I in range. So right, we want to step through these numbers, and then if two adjacent numbers are in the wrong order, then we want to swap them. So for I in range, we want to go from 0, which is the first number, to num grades, and we want to increment by 1. Okay, now this is the thing you have to think about, though, that I'm going to the first time through I'm going to compare 60 to 70. The second time through I'm going to compare that to that, and then the third time through this to this. What you got to see is, if I'm comparing the present position to the next position, do I really want to go through all the way through num grade times? No, I don't, because when I get to 90, it is going to try to compare 90, which will be at that point grades of I, to grades of I plus 1, and there is nothing here, so you are going to get what? You are going to get an out of range index. And so because we are comparing the present grade to the next grade, we don't want to go to num grades, we want to stop one before that, because really the last thing we want to compare is the 80 to the 90. We don't want to go through that last time. And so hopefully that makes sense. And that's one of the things why these programs crash, is because you think, well, I got 4 grades, I need to go through the list 4 times. No, you need to go through 3 times, because you're going to compare first to second, second to third, and then third to fourth, and then you don't want to go through that last time. And so I hope that makes sense, because that is one of the things that makes this program not work. And so let's see if we can clear this. And let's see if we can come back. Let's start this baby again. And so again, we're going to do 4 grades, and it's going to be 60, and it's going to be 70, and it's going to be 80, and it's going to be 90. And so what you can see is we want to go through one, we want to stop one before num grade. And so I would say for I in range. And where do I want to go? I want to start at 0. I'll start at the 60, and then I want to go num grades minus 1, because I don't want to get to the 90 and then try to compare it to a number that's not there, and then I'll go in increments of 1. Now what am I going to do? I am going to say if grades of I, that would be 60, if grades of I is less than grades of, I want to compare 60 to 90, so I compare grades of I to 60 to 70. I want to compare grades of I to the next one. What is the next one in the list? Grades of I plus 1. Okay, and then we've got our colon, and then we've got our colon. All right, so if this one is less than this one, what do we want to do? We want to swap them, because you want the bigger numbers first. And so then I would say if grades of I is less than grades of I plus 1, what would you do? You want to swap those two. Now what you would probably think down here is, you would probably think, well, inside this if statement, I would want to say grades of I is equal to grades of I plus 1, and then grades of I plus 1 is equal to grades of I. And so this is kind of like how you would usually think about it. I'll take grades of I plus 1, the 70, and put it in the position of the 60, and then I will take grades of I and put it in the position of grades of I plus 1, and in effect swap those positions. But what you got to see is this does not work. This does not work. No. That does not work. Why? Because let's think of this. I'm going to take grades of I plus 1 and I'm going to put it in grades of I. Well, then in that case, 70 is going to go there, and then 70 remains in the next position, and then you would have 80 and 90. So you took grades of I plus 1, 70, and you put it in grades of I. Now your list looks like this, okay? Now when you say grades of I plus 1, that 70 is equal to grades of I, then you're just going to put it back, and you're going to have 70, 70, 80, and 90. So what happens there? What happens is you lose the 60. And so what you got to see is before you put grades of I plus 1 into grades of I, once you do that, you're going to lose your 60. So you got to take 60 and you got to put it off to the side so that you don't lose it. All right, so this is the way you have to do it. And let's see if I can erase this. Oh my goodness, I need a bigger eraser. Give me just a second here. That's going to take forever. Let me get a big fat eraser. All right, that will erase it quickly. Okay, so now let's come back to our most excellent pen. Okay, so now what you have to see is that what you're going to put in this if statement, is if you need to swap, the first thing you need to do is you need to put that 60 to the side. So swap is going to be equal to grades of I, and that way we don't write over it. Now what I can say is grades of I is equal to grades of I plus 1. Okay, now that puts the 70 into the 60 position, and now I need the 60 in the 70 position, so I would say grades of I plus 1 is equal to what? It's equal to swap. That's that variable where I was holding the 60 off to the side, and so I would say SWP. Okay, and this is the code that will change 2 positions in the list. And so the first time through, what is this going to do? Well, it is going to take the first time through the loop, it is going to take the 60 and change it with the 70. So I'm going to have 70, 60, okay, and then it's going to compare the 60 to the 80, and it's going to swap, and so then it's going to be 80 and 60, and then it's going to compare the 60 and the 90, and then it's going to be 70, 80, 90, 60. Okay, so it's gonna basically just kind of bubble that 60 from the top of the list down to the bottom of the list, and everything else is going to go up by 1. Now, am I in a better position than I was before? Yes, because at least the low grade is all the way down here. But now what you can see is if I just go through the list one time, it's going to trade 60 for 70. It's going to trade a few. It's going to kind of get them closer to the right order, but it is not. You're going to have to go through again. And then the next time through, it should take the 70 all the way down to the second to the last, and then it will do it a third time, and it'll be in the right order. So what do we need to do? We need another for loop. And this is going to be, again, for I in range. Okay, and this is going to be an outside one. We still always want to start with 0. All right, and then we want to increment by 1, but now we got to think, how many times do we want to go through this list? Well, you got to see the first time through, it's going to put the 60 in the right position. The second time through, it's going to put the 70 in the right position. The third time through, it's going to put the 80 in the right position. And if the 60, the 70, and the 80 are in the right position, the 90 has to be in the right position. So we don't need to go through 4 times. We don't need to go through num grade times. We need to go through what? Num grade minus 1. Num grade minus 1 again, because again, you'll get the 60 right, you'll get the 70 right, you'll get the 80 right, and if the 60, the 70, and the 80 are in the right spot, 90 has to be in the right spot. So you think about that. Let's come over here and let's try to code this. I hope this makes sense. We will come over to our most excellent Visual Studio Code. Man, guys, this might be a two cup lesson here. We might need a little extra jet fuel at this point. I hope that makes sense to you. If it doesn't, go back and watch it again and think about it a little bit. But we're going to come over here now to Visual Studio Code, I do believe. Okay, maybe I will need to call this up. Okay, there we are. Now what we're going to come over to is we're going to come over to that average grades program that we had done before, because already we're inputting the grades, we are printing the grades, we are averaging the grades, we're printing the average, and we're printing the high, and we're printing the low. If you don't understand this, go back and watch the last lesson where we developed this. And so the last thing that we did in this code was to find the high grade and print it, and find the low grade and print it. And so now we need to sort. And so we are going to need that outside loop that basically, corrects things one at a time. So we're going to say for I in range, and then where we're going to go from 0, and then remember we need to do it one less than num grades. So we're going to say num grades for 0 to num grades, and then we need to not go through that many times, but one less than that many times. And then we are going to need to increment by 1. Okay, and so that is that outside loop, and every time through the outside loop it's going to get one number in the right position. Now in each one of those we need to go again for I in range, and we need to do our swapping. Okay, and so again it just happens that in both cases we need to go through num grades minus 1 and 1. All right, and our friend Mr. Colon, don't forget our friend Mr. Colon. All right, and now what we need to do is we need to do an if statement. If, and then what grades of I, not grades of 1, grades of I made that mistake last time and it was a very bad mistake. If grades of I is less than grades of I plus 1. So if this grade is less than this grade, they're in the wrong order and I need to swap them. Okay, so if grades of I is less than grades of I plus 1, if this grade is less than the next grade, I need to swap them because we wanted to order them in descending order. So if grades of I is less than grades of I plus 1, we want to swap them. So what do? We say swap, which is that little holding variable. It's going to be equal to grades of I, because we don't want to lose grades of I. And now we're going to, I keep doing that. Man, that is going to kill me. This is a horrible error to do that. Okay, so swap is equal to grades of I, and now grades of I is going to be equal to the next one, grades of I plus 1, right? They were in the wrong order, so I'm going to take grades of I plus 1 and I'm going to put it where grades was. Now, if they're in the right order, it'll hop over this if statement and just go to the next one. So if grades of I are less than grades of I plus 1, swap is equal to grades of I. Now grades of I is equal to the next one, grades of I plus 1. And so right now grades of I and grades of I plus 1 are the same. And so now I've got to make grades of I plus 1. It needs to be what? That swap variable. And so now this line of code will take these two numbers and switch them. Okay, it will take those two numbers and it will switch them. Okay, and now that will step through the list, switching all the things that are in the wrong order. It will bubble the lowest number to the bottom of the list. Okay, but that now has one number in the right position. Then it has to come back and it's got to go through the whole list again. And then the second to the lowest number will be in the right position. And then the third to the lowest number will be in the right position. And then by definition, the top number has to be the highest number. And that's why in this outside loop, we just go through num grades plus 1. Okay, now that should do it. So what we need to do is we need to print those grades out. So I'm going to say print, and then I'm going to say your sorted grade list is like that. Okay. Hopefully I wasn't covering up any important code. You can see what I did with the grades by plus 1 there. All right. And now I need to step through and print the sorted list. So then I'm going to say for I in range, right? I start at 0. I want to go all the way through num grades because I want to print all the grades, and then increment of 1. Who's your friend? Mr. Colon. And then I'm going to print grades of I, and this should be the sorted list. All right. This is a little bit frightening. I'm not going to lie to you, because sorting is hard to do. It's hard to write a sorting program in Python anyway. It's even harder to do it live in front of people. But let's give this baby a shot. And first of all, let's hope that it compiles, hope it runs. How many grades do you have? Okay, let's say 4. And I'm going to put them in the wrong order. I'm going to put them in 60, and then 70, and then 80. And so this is the worst possible order, right? 90. Hold your breath. Boom! Who's your huckleberry? I'm your huckleberry. Do you see that? Look at that. We started out with the numbers going 60, 70, 80, 90, and it says your grades are 60, 70, 80, 90, and then it says your average is 75, your low grade is 60, your high grade is 90, and your sorted grade list is 90, 80, 70, 60. Okay. Man, it seems so hard when you're trying to think through it, and you were probably doing all types of insanity and all types of nonsense. But really, it was just like, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's like 7 lines of code did this. All right, now, as I said before, there are just some crazy things that you can do to make this run more efficiently, because like if you think I'm going all the way down the list every time, even when I know that that last number is already right. And so there's ways that you can do this sort that takes a lot less computation power and is a lot more efficient. But what I wanted you to see was just understand how to sort grades first, and then we'll figure out later on how to do things more efficiently. Now remember, we always want to check our code, so we better run this a few more times. And like one of the things I want to do is, what if we start in the right order? Let's make sure that we don't mess it up. And so what I am going to do is I'm going to say that I have 4 grades, and then I'm going to put them in the right order: 90, 80, 70, 60. And look at that. Average is 75, low is 60, high is 90, and it goes 90, 80, 70, 60. So if they start out in the right order, it doesn't mess them up. Now let's try to do it in more random order and just make sure that it works for that. And so we'll come and kill this. And oh, that was, I don't know what that was, but all right, so let's come in and let's run it. How many grades do I have? Let's say that I have 7 grades, and let's say I have 20, and I have 90, and I have 15, and I have 77, and then I have 95, and then I have, let's see, I have 100, okay, and then I have 28, like that. All right, now let's look at this. Your low grade is 15. That looks right. Your high grade is 100. Your sorted grade list is 100, 95, 90, 77, 28, 20, and 15. That works. Okay, guys, knowing how to sort a list is really, you really got to think, and I hope that it made sense as I was going through this explanation. If it doesn't, you know, guys, if I just jumped in here and started coding, it would make no sense at all. But go back and watch the first part of the video again and make sure that you understand this. Make sure that you understand what is going on here with this explanation. And then what your homework is for next week is that it kind of made sense when you watch me do it, but you need to know how to do this on your own. So what your homework is go back and watch the first part of the video again, where I kind of explain the algorithm, okay, and then turn the video off, erase your program, and now write the program without looking at the one that I wrote and without watching me do it, because you need to think through it enough that you can do it on your own without watching me. And that's enough of a homework, because again, this is a little bit of a tricky thing that we're trying to do. Okay, guys, I hope you're having as much fun taking these classes as I am making them. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up. That always helps me with the old YouTube algorithms, helps my videos get featured a little bit more. And then also, if you've not subscribed already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. When you do, make sure you ring the bell so you will get notifications of my future video releases. And then share this with friends. Think about maybe posting this video on your social media. All right, guys, this is Paul McWhorter from TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys next week.